So Israel takes this attack very seriously. They see it as a ratcheting up in terms of the incremental threat for targeting the prime minister's private residence on a weekend where he wasn't there, but he could well have been there. They see it as a serious escalation, both by Hezbollah and kind of clearly led by the Iranian proxies. The drones we saw just over a week ago, another drone incident which killed 4 soldiers in a base about 60 kilometers away from the Lebanese border. And the Caesarea home of the Prime Minister is just slightly further south by a few kilometers. The drones are new elements of warfare that Israel is facing over the last year. Just in terms of proportion, if Hezbollah have fired about 10,000 projectiles, rockets, missiles, and drones, about 1,500 of them have been drones, and about 150 or so have landed or have landed and evaded detection. And this is largely because that the anti-missile systems are built to defend against rockets, and the drones that fly over a lower altitude are smaller to pick up on the radar. And also because of the topography of Israel, the hilly lowlands are very difficult to pick up as well when they're flying low. So as a combination of these factors, 3 drones were fired over the weekend towards the Prime Minister's residence. 2 of them were intercepted, and one of them got through, even though, as you say, it was being tracked. And so sometimes fighter jets or helicopter gunships are used to remove this threat, but on this case it wasn't successful. And so yes, Israel takes this incredibly serious. They remain vigilant, and also kind of whilst using the existing technology, are continuously developing new technology to deal with this threat as well. Firstly, in terms of Sinwar's death, we understood from senior commanders that they had a strong indication that he was in that area and likely trying to flee, escape into Egypt. He was found with about £10,000 on him in shekels, and so the understanding was that far from a kind of a heroic last stand, he was trying to flee. They had that indication because his DNA was found very close to the tunnels where the 6 hostages were killed just over a month ago. And quite incredible that although they had an understanding that he was likely in the vicinity, it was pretty kind of regular soldiers that in the end kind of took the shot and were able to confirm his death. Since his departure from this world, the IDF have decided to release footage that they'd probably been sitting on for some time, showing him on the day of October the 7th last year, fleeing with his family and kind of hiding reserves of food and drink, and even a large flat screen TV, taking it down to the shelter. And I'm presuming that the IDF released that deliberately now in an effort of kind of psychological warfare as well, to show to the Palestinians kind of, this is your leader, this is the leader that is only looking after himself, both in the beginning and at the end of his life. There's good news and bad news. The good news is that with Sinwar's death, not only was he a symbolic leader, but he was also the commander-in-chief and kind of responsible for the strategic direction of Hamas and the implementation not only of October 7th, but of the fighting since then. So he was a military commander in a true sense, and in that way, it's a significant defeat for Hamas militarily. However, what we've seen over the last few months, and perpetuated over several months now, is the proliferation of the chain of command, so that Hamas continues to offer fighting to the Israeli soldiers on a daily basis across the Gaza Strip. This explains the IDF maneuvering in northern Gaza, in Jabalia, and in other areas where kind of counterinsurgency efforts are underway to try and restrict the capacity of Hamas to be able to continue to carry out attacks. So that's kind of there's no shortcut there. Whilst there remain cells fighting, even able to occasionally fire off rockets as well on Israel's home front, then the fighting continues. But the really bad news, I think, is regard to the hostages, that there is a concern now that it may not even be Hamas cells that are responsible or in control of the remaining hostages. Again, the proliferation, it could be Islamic Jihad cells, it could be what's called the Hamulot, the large family clans, it could be criminal gangs. So it's not even clear if there is a centralized body in which Israel can even conduct a negotiation. This is why you've heard calls over the last few days to incentivize people to give, if they have hostages, to give them up with financial rewards and that they can save their lives, in the hope that these individual hostage keepers do come out and return the hostages. But I think, if we're honest, then that's there may be an isolated instance of that, but 101 hostages remain for over a year, and their future is still pretty bleak and a real concern. I think it's more of the latter. I think it is part of the stage. It's part of kind of an effort to root and branch, eradicate the Hezbollah threat. I mean, even in peace times, kind of experts here used to say, the key to really the long-term impede terror infrastructure is to follow the money trail. And that's relevant with both Hamas and Hezbollah. So what we've seen over the last day or so is that in tandem to the ground operation, which my sources say is going relatively well, although kind of, again, from an IDF perspective, they are losing soldiers there, and that comes at a heavy price. But generally, in terms of removing the Hezbollah threat from what they refer to as the line of fire, those villages that topographically look over onto inside Israel, that's going quite well. I mean, it still might be several weeks while it needs to continue. And at the same time, there is the bombing campaign against Hezbollah infrastructure and weapons depots, etc., both in Beirut and in the Bekaa Valley. Then the targeting of the financial structures is just another further element of putting the squeeze on a terror organization. I think the Israeli side is deliberately keeping all of us guessing. I'm not privy to any of that intel. It's being held deliberately close in close quarters. I think if we game it out, there are scenarios that suggest definitely this is an appropriate time to strike. I mean, almost Israel is following an Iranian playbook, where over the last time in April, Iran took a few weeks to respond, and that kept the Israeli side in jeopardy. So I think it's kind of almost playing them at their own game to an extent. The battle plans, as I understand it, are still being fine-tuned and coordinated with America and the UK and the other regional allies as well. And we can only guess kind of to what extent and just how ferocious the response will be. On one level, they will want to target Iran's military capacity and their capacity to fire rockets, and that's what you say. The deployment of the American anti-ballistic missile systems is about that, to prevent that. But Israel doesn't want to be in this kind of tit-for-tat, strike counter-strike scenario with Iran. They're looking to put an end to this conflict, but that may also be wishful thinking, because the extent of just how powerful that strike needs to be kind of would need to be quite excessive of everything else we've seen until now. So, I mean, I'm sorry to be vague, but we're all left guessing deliberately. All eyes are on the nuclear program as well, which would essentially pose an existential threat. Right now, is conventional weapons, they can do substantial damage, but that's different from kind of coming under a nuclear umbrella. So that deadline is ever approaching, and I think that's a concern. But the Israeli public generally have a high level of resilience. I mean, especially the residents of the north, that even as we speak, are coming under hundreds of attacks from Hezbollah on a daily basis. That has sometimes reached the center and Tel Aviv as well. And there is a level of understanding that some of this, and thankfully Israel has a fantastic anti-missile defense system, both short, medium, and long. And that has protected the country, but this is not a complete solution, and so inevitably some of them get through. What the authorities are reminding people is just to stay vigilant, to follow the guidelines, to be in the safe rooms or the shelters and protect themselves. And so there is, I think, a strong understanding from the Israeli public that's what's necessary, and that this overall threat hanging over the country needs to come to an end after over a year of fighting.